So I was recording and posting a course on sustainability, but there is a proposal activity being pushed here on the campus that I live on and teach at and do research, the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. And the idea is to instrument the campus and monitor the carbon footprints and drive towards net zero, but also towards sustainability. And I found it necessary to come back and then maybe summarize briefly this report called Net Zero on Campus, a guide for universities and colleges to accelerate climate action from the Sustainable Development Solution Network, which is, oops, let me get the pointer up, which is a global solution initiative, a global initiative for the UN. And academia campuses are the places where minds are trained to go and conquer the world or save the world and govern the world and so on and so forth. So climate change being a global problem, and we looked at adaptation elsewhere, we looked at solutions here in this context of net zero for industries, for cement, for steel, and so on and so forth. What better place to try do net zero, to use it as a living lab, learning, teaching, research, implementation, advice, policies, etc., than academic campuses. So this is kind of a longish report, but I'm going to squeeze it into a few podcasts as usual. This is just showing how the advisory panel was set up. So you had people from the US, from South America and Central America. You had people from Europe and also from Pakistan here, as well as India and South Africa, Australia, and Hong Kong. So advice is taken across the world, which means the plans presented here and the guidance provided is not just for the global north and the rich countries, but actually also has the developing world, the global south in mind. Some people have complained to me about this terminology, global south, global north. Well, it's a descriptor that carries some meaning, so I'm just going to carry it forward as well. So this is the structure of the net zero on the campus in terms of the guidance being provided. Journey to net zero on campus, the key elements to consider on the net zero journey. We are embedded in the bigger system, so whether you can be net zero depends on a lot of things, but it's interesting to go through this exercise to see what are the things that actually can be done within the system, such as it is, to actually accelerate the climate action and teach and research on climate actions to scale it up, transfer elsewhere, and so on. So net zero initiatives on campus in this report focus on energy, which is a clear target, mobility, facilities, waste minimization and recycling. Again, a lot of no regret decisions can come out of this, and the value chain itself. So energy, you are not always completely independent, but you have a lot of space often to do things. Mobility is something that is increasing more and more, even in India, like a campus of IIT Bombay. The number of vehicles is incredibly high and maybe too high, right? So then you add to that net zero initiatives off campus, which can act as amplifiers of change. So you do this here and find ways to communicate, do outreach, and be connected to the community around and the broader community to act as amplifiers of change, engaging with student bodies and net zero aligned education, research, and innovation, which must happen if you are doing things on campus, right? So this will be the new way to do things, because climate change is such a thing that it percolates every aspect of life, and saving carbon emissions or decarbonizing the system does involve everything we do, from what we eat, what we drink, how we travel, where we live, what we wear, and the computers we use, and so on and so forth. I'll read off the introduction, since the rest of the material I'm going to just reduce it to figures and tables. as the risks and impacts of climate change become more visible every year, the call for net zero emissions is no longer restricted to country level commitments. It has become equally important for non-state actors like businesses and other institutions to build pathways towards net zero by mid-century or sooner. Is it a dream? Well, at least we can begin to plan, because many of the country level plans and global plans on net zero depend on technological promises of carbon capture and utilization, bioenergy, EVs, which may or may not materialize. So we are maybe hallucinating a little bit there. Universities and colleges are keepers and transmitters of knowledge for the next generation and are definitely bound to implement future thinking strategies. So we have an opportunity to train the future generations to be earth system doctors who can fix things that are wrong, instead of the climate pathologists who will just keep telling you what's wrong and how bad things can get. It's like some pathologist telling you you're going to die, but not telling you which doctor to go to get treated, right? As such, institutions of higher education have the unique opportunity to not only build strategies to reduce operational emissions, but also to champion climate research, knowledge, and action in the wider community. To enable these transitions in the higher education sector, this guide has been developed as an accessible toolbox for sustainability and facility managers at universities and colleges, while acknowledging that each educational institution operates within its own unique context. This guide provides a wide range of resources that are relevant at different stages of the decarbonization journey. So it's a interactive document, so there are lots of resources and hyperlinks which you can keep on clicking and get additional material and details as we go along. Okay, so I won't read too much more here. Several net zero university guidelines and frameworks have been used to inform this guide, in particular the early work done by Cool Campus, a how-to guide for college and university climate action planning. Resources from the university Race to Zero. Second Nature. I'm getting a sneeze, and last time I saw that I sneezed rather loudly, and I don't go back and edit it. I should maybe, but please live with it. Okay. The Alliance for Sustainability Leadership in Education. This guide also references standards and frameworks used in corporate net zero planning, including the Science Based Targets Initiative and reports from the Climate Works Center. Climate Works is one of those carbon capture initiatives, and you hope they succeed because the world depends on it for now. Understanding net zero, critical mission for universities and colleges. What is net zero? Net zero broadly refers to a state in which greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere are balanced by their active removal. So it's not like emissions will go to zero. That's not possible. So you take out hopefully more than what you are emitting, so that you also draw down historical accumulated carbon. However, given the amount of greenhouse gases that have accumulated over the last 2 centuries of human activity and the continued depletion of the global carbon budget, merely balancing emissions will not be sufficient and must be accompanied by efforts to reduce the generation of emissions. So here, balancing global carbon budget refers to what I have talked about elsewhere. Accumulated carbon is proportional, or the linear warming is linearly proportional to accumulated carbon, which means if you want to remain below a threshold of 1.5 or 2 degrees C, then you can approximately estimate how much more carbon you can emit. Of course, there are other greenhouse gases and there are uncertainties in estimating these carbon budgets and so on. Nonetheless, it's a useful zeroth order guide. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And here we are with a schematic on the key objective of net zero is to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere by reducing emissions, so equivalent to reducing the tap inflow, and removing the amount that is already present, making sure the outflow drain is open. So here is the increase the outflow, so carbon sinks and carbon capture technologies. Again, that's the technological promise that's not working at scale. So we are producing greenhouse gas emissions, so you have to reduce the flow through reducing the levels of greenhouse gases being emitted to the atmosphere. Greenhouse gas emissions from human activities are being poured into this atmosphere. Current level of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere has led to, this says 1.1, but we are approximately at 1.4 or so by now, coming into 2024. And the levels at which global temperature increase is above 1.5 degrees C is estimated to be here. So we need to reduce the inflow and increase the outflow. Or sorry about that. Or the carbon capture. I have some serious allergy, but maybe related to pollution or just some bug going around, but allergies are usually not related to bugs. So here there would be a severe escalation of impacts if the world were to warm above 1.5 degrees C. So why is net zero important? Because we have some idea of what happens with warming. So you have impacts on droughts, wildfires. So this is showing things that are, I think, a bit uncertain. So hundreds of years from now you would be, heading to La La Land if you don't reduce the emissions and cap the accumulation of emissions. But you have 2 months average drought, 41% more burned area in wildfire. 4 months average drought, 62% burned areas in wildfire if you go from 1.5 to 2 degrees C. If you go to 3 degrees C, you will have 10 months average drought, 97% more burned area, and with 4 degrees C you will have more frequent and extreme droughts and not just long-lasting droughts. Duration, frequency and intensity is what you always look for in these things. And there will be impacts on food, so wheat, rice, maize, soybean production will suffer. Already they are suffering. Agricultural yields will fall rapidly. Local fish species will go extinct if we warm to 3 degrees C, and high levels of food insecurity and development paths reversed if we hit 4 degrees C. There are a lot of uncertainties in these claims of impacts, but do you really want to see if that will happen or not, or do you want to take this as a risk and do all you can to reduce the impact already? So there are also impacts on coasts, impacts on nature. So the idea is net zero is important for all these things, most importantly for keeping the warming as low as possible. And if we do hit net zero by 2050 or before, we are very likely to try and stay below 2 degrees C by 2100 with some fairly high probability. The trick is, of course, to figure out what will happen with each fraction of degree warming above 2 degrees C, because we are going to cross it, and what will happen if we cross it. So I will stop this introductory podcast here. We'll come back and continue with the details. This should be about a half a dozen podcasts or so to cover the entire report, but there are some good points, so we should go through them patiently, even though obviously I'm always going to be brief. You have the report available online. You can go into the details, and there are enormous amount of resources and references provided, toolboxes that you should follow up if this is of interest, or if you are in charge of establishing or implementing net zero on any particular campus. Okay.